The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
We are back in after an extended break with episode 68 of the Silly Goose Gang Podcast, and we are incredibly delighted and honoured to be joined on our comeback episode with Bo Sandoval, who's the Director of Strength and Conditioning at the UFC Performance Institute. So, Bo, thank you very much for giving up your time and joining us today.
Man, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I don't know if I'm more impressed, Bo, with your job title or the beard. I'm not. That is a strong beard.
Hey, I'll take that. I just cut about 3 inches off of it. So
I'm getting to the age now where I know Ali is as well. Where I've just had a shave, but I'm getting the grey bits coming through here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Lots of salt in it these days.
It's awesome being middle-aged. I think that's what we are. Oh man, yeah. How do we find you, Bo? How's life treating you?
Life's doing, it's doing pretty well. We've kind of dipped in and out of normalcy and the COVID lockdowns and those sorts of things, but not too much to complain about in our neck of the woods. We've my boys have been able to go back to school. My wife's been able to continue to work. I've been able to continue to work. So we've been pretty fortunate. I know some have not been as fortunate. And so we're just happy to keep plugging along, But yeah, everything is going well. We've got plenty of exciting events that have gone on in the last 16 months and lots of more coming up in the UFC. So no way to get bored around here in terms of work. There's plenty to do. Yeah.
I'll bet. I bet you've probably have to deal with. Well, I know a lot of crazy characters. So, do you get to deal with these guys hands on, on a daily basis when they're out there, or how does it work?
Yeah, we so our facility in Vegas, we probably have around 35 to 40 resident fighters that live in this area that we see routinely week to week. And then we have those close by in Arizona, New Mexico, California, Utah, that we may see once a month, twice a month. And then the spectrum just sort of spreads out as the distance, separates us. But there's some fighters we may see once or twice a year. There's others we might see quarterly. And then there's a remote interaction that's really, it's based on their engagement. But with the remote interactions, along with the residents that we have, we routinely operate with about 80 to 85% of our roster year round. Our roster sits at right about 700 athletes globally. So we stay busy. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to look after.
Yeah.
But were you actually involved? So, but these podcasts always happen this way. They always go kind of all over the place. But were you involved in the actual setting up of the Performance Institute, Bo?
I was recruited and hired during the process. So the actual construction of the building and all those sorts of things were kind of already in place. We showed up, me and my team, we showed up, I guess it was probably about a month before our grand opening. So there was still a little bit of drywall going up, that kind of stuff, but we were just kind of waiting for them to put the finishing touches on it. We'd already kind of begun starting some conversations with local fight teams and some coaches and a few athletes. So the day the doors opened, we did have a handful of athletes to begin with right off the jump.
Yeah. So that's I'm going to assume that you must be extremely highly rated to be invited or headhunted to work for the director of the UFC's PI. Like, it must be fairly highly thought of.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a good pat on the back. And look, I was invited to participate in the recruiting process, not that they just gave me a key to the door, right? From the first conversation, but it was flattering to be able to participate and compete for the role. And my previous experience in combat sports kind of helped prepare me with being able to tackle some of the things that they were trying to go after and what the kind of services they wanted to provide to the rostered athletes. So yeah, pretty fortunate to get to compete, and then it came to fruition, and we got to move from the frigid temperatures of Michigan, which is northeast coast, all the way out west to where we'd rather burn to death than freeze to death. Me and my friends. So yeah, it's been a good transition for us. It's been just under 5 years now.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. One of the things you've just touched on there, Bo, was you were at University of Michigan as the assistant director of Olympic sports at Michigan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and one of the things, this is one thing that a lot of our British listeners, and I know Chris won't get it, is I don't think over here we appreciate how big the NCAA system is. I follow a lot of NCAA football. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, not Michigan Wolverines or Southern Miss Golden Eagles, but we'll put that to the side just now. But people don't get how big University of Michigan is. So just for our listeners and the people listening to that, and maybe to blow Chris's mind a little bit, the big football stadium at Michigan, what's its capacity, roughly speaking?
The last time I was there, with the addition of some other luxury boxes, it was right around 93,000 officially. But on game day, they were known for letting upwards of 114,000 in the gate. So Michigan fans are known for standing so that their counterparts can actually squeeze into the bleacher areas. So yeah, it wasn't uncommon to have 114 plus thousand folks in there. Now, keep in mind, the resident population in Ann Arbor is only 100,000. So football is quite a big deal in that area.
Yep.
Of the country.
So I don't understand football at all, American football anyway. And but there was a video, I sent it to Ali on Instagram.
Yeah, it was Virginia Tech Hokies with their entrance to Enter Sandman.
It was Enter Sandman. It was like the first game back or something. And I was watching it going, holy shit, I want to move to America. This is fucking awesome. Enter Sandman, the stadium is full and there's like loads of veterans there. I'm like, that's so fucking cool. That's amazing.
It's an exciting game. I can remember as a child being in high school playing for my high school team and coming out, and our stadium was called the Jungle, and we were coming out to Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, and the same feeling. I'm just like, it's Friday night, let's go, nothing else matters, and fucking ready to just kill somebody.
Just getting pumped up and ready to just smash.
Quite an electric energy, when a game's coming on. Just like, you step into a stadium during World Cup time or anything like that, you're watching a rugby sevens game, like, man, it's electric. Like,
some of
it translates into the crowd and everywhere else.
Some of the coolest things is certainly for me and Ali anyways, is watching Flower of Scotland getting played at a rugby Scotland rugby game, Scotland versus England at Murrayfield, and Flower is you're like, fuck, I want to fight, give me a fucking claymore on the horse. I mean, it's funny how that can really pump people up, but that's man, those atmospheres I've never been to a UFC event, but I guess some of those events must be like, I've been to a lot of boxing shows in Scotland. Ricky Burns, some of the Ricky Burns shows in Glasgow when he was world champion, fucking crazy, properly, like everybody's shit faced and chatting to us. I think he fought Kevin Mitchell. And I remember sitting in the stands, and it was the SECC, so it would have been 15,000, but the fucking stands were moving. Like everybody's jumping up and down and throwing fight. Oh man, I love that shit. Yeah, that's amazing. So
for an indoor event, a UFC event is, man, it's something else. You gotta get in there and feel it to believe it, because it's insane.
I don't think I want to go to one in wherever, Manchester or Liverpool, or I think I want to go to one in Vegas. Like that would be cool.
I've heard that. I've only been to an event in Vegas. I've been to one in Florida, and I've been to one in Texas, and all were amazing. But T-Mobile Arena in Vegas is it just attracts everybody, from the normal crowd to the celebrity crowd, and some of the biggest fights that we host are there, and it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat.
It's now one of the things that's cool is in it, and this is going back. I came from a boxing background, Bo, so that's why I always like to refer to boxing. But watching like the Ricky Hatton versus Mayweather and Jose Luis Castillo, I think they were MGM, and fucking the British crowd singing songs was just staggering, absolutely amazing. So that to me looks really cool. So maybe we'll get it. Maybe we'll get it. I always said maybe it'll be Josh Taylor. If he gets a big fight in Vegas, maybe that'll be the fight that convinces me to jump on a flight and get over to
a trip. Yeah,
that'd be fucking amazing. Anything to get a few beers in the sun, right? But
Fight capital of the world, man. It's not a bad spot to be.
yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, so we went off track again, haven't we? We just fucking go all over the place.
Yeah, that's right. It was because I was asking about Michigan. One of the things I was going to ask though, when you were, because obviously before you came to the UFC Performance Institute Bowl, you were at the University of Michigan working with the Olympic sports. How did you work? Because at the moment with UFC, I imagine it's, and I use the phrase easier in relative terms, but it's easier to program for MMA than I would imagine it was for multiple Olympic sports. Because, with Olympic sports, you must have been doing everything from, the wrestling team. I believe you worked with like the modern pentathlon team as well. So how were you able to jump from, potentially one period working with the wrestling team to then the next minute focusing on the run at the end of the pentathlon, just for argument's sake? How were you able to jump from one to the other?
So I'm going to back up a little bit. So before the University of Michigan, I was at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, part of the high performance team there. And I predominantly worked with combat sports there, but I had a few special projects on my plate in those 3 years I was there, which included a couple of elite marathoners, a few modern pentathletes, and a couple of our former triathletes that had turned professional Ironman. And so sort of dipping my toes into the waters of endurance sports really kind of gave me quite a deeper toolbox when it came to supplementing endurance training with other field sports, such as men's lacrosse or soccer, football. It just gives you a deeper toolbox in terms of strategies, how to go after things at a micro level that may be supplemental to another sport, but you get really good at them because they're the meat and potatoes of a sport like decathlon or triathlon. Then when I got to the University of Michigan, when we first got there were only about 3 of us on staff with 32 Olympic sports. And the idea was to generate a department for us to develop talent, to recruit talent, and to build a department to fully service all 32 programs that were there. So over the course of 8 years, we added an additional 9 full-time positions. We added a full postgraduate curriculum. We had postgraduate fellows that were there, as well as an army of voluntary interns and paid interns. And then we were able to essentially apply a much more systematic approach to coaching and providing services that was much more catered to the needs of each sport, because no coach had more than 3 sports to themselves. And so once we it took us a couple of years to build into that mode. Once we got there, my primary areas of focus were track and field, all events in track and field, men's lacrosse and women's basketball. And so that was able to kind of narrow things down a little bit, but I was able to take some of the strategies and things that I adopted from sports like modern pen and apply them to certain areas of the training calendar with those various sports, depending on what the needs and demands were. And then being with the background in all combat sports, when I was with the Olympic Committee, it was wrestling, boxing, taekwondo, judo, fencing, Greco-Roman wrestling. And so I was able to help out the University of Michigan freestyle team while we were there for quite a bit. And it was that pedigree and being around those weight classification sports where there's weight cutting involved, still heavy anaerobic, metabolic, anaerobic qualities of all of those sports in different doses. The UFC was kind of looking for that sort of background. So that helped me with my recruitment there. But at the University of Michigan, when you look at the entire microcosm of sport there, it's not like those kids just fucking wake up out of bed, they go practice, they train, and they go home and go to bed. It's a 5-star academic institution. So their academic demands are in the top 3% in the country. Not to mention, we just so happen to be at one of the most competitive athletic institutions in the country as well. So from a just a mental stress standpoint, it's one of the most difficult places for a collegiate athlete to compete at the highest levels due to the academic demand. Now, with that being said, it on our end, it does get quite simplistic. They're not very complex in terms of the training strategies and schemes. Because number one, first and foremost, you got to teach college kids how to sleep and how to eat. we probably spent more time on that than anything. They couldn't even tap into their God-given physical talents at their optimum until we could get them to nourish themselves and actually go to bed. So the training aspect was actually, we had carried a philosophy of just sound fundamentals and really getting them to absorb the fundamentals and be able to recover and adapt from those. And those caused enough stress to cause quite a bit of adaptation and progression throughout the time. Now we were able, at an institution like that, we were able to get our hands on quite a few Olympic development athletes as well. So we had some exceptional talents that came through there that were quite able to go above and beyond the fundamentals of training. But I think oftentimes people see a big program like that that's highly successful, and they make the assumption like they must be doing just out of this world training and it must be just another level. And really what we're really trying to do is just take this massive monster and get them dialed into the fundamentals so that they can perform at a high level. And so that was what we instituted for those 8 years. Now we were in a position to really kind of get at the forefront of cutting edge technology in terms of GPS technology and tracking systems and monitoring systems, diagnostic equipment. We had a great partnership with our physiology and sports science departments, where we had students and doctoral students and postgraduate students that would help us with not only gathering data, but disseminating and aggregating data so it would be something meaningful for us. So it was a great time to be there. But that being said, I've been at this for about 21 years now, and nothing has been even close to as fulfilling as working with these fighters day in and day out.
Yeah, that's a long time to be. This is one of the things that I get super pissed with is, I think it got worse during lockdown. There was what everybody's now doing. I don't know if it's the same thing in America, but over here, like, everybody's doing these boot camp things and becoming a PT, and it fucking pisses me off so much when you get, because I know good strength and conditioning coaches in Scotland and guys who have went to university for 10 fucking years and earned their stripes. Guys like you who have studied everything and understand things, and then you get some asshole doing these stupid courses. You're like, come on, like just work harder and eat less. No, just do more burpees. Like, no,
it's in every industry, isn't it?
Yeah, it pisses me off so much. But that's so so. I'm going to assume that you would use very similar. So the fundamentals would be the same for all sports, essentially. So are you teaching everybody, compound lifts, or are you teaching everybody Olympic lifts, or what are the basic tools that you're trying to teach everybody?
That's a great question. So when I think of lifts or I think of methods, to me those are just tools in the toolbox. So for each of those tools, that sometimes it gets overlooked by your buddies that have the online boot camps and shit, is that each of those tools took quite amount of time to amass an expertise in. So when I went to learn weightlifting, I not only weightlifted and competed, but I also officiated and I coached, and I ran a club for 12 years. And so, and that was only, I didn't want to be a weightlifting coach my entire life, but I wanted to be exceptional at being able to teach those movements because I believed in them and I wanted them to contribute towards my S&C programs. When I wanted to learn powerlifting, I trained with powerlifters and I learned optimal techniques and strategies around different styles of deadlifting and different styles of squatting for those, so that I could benefit when it came time for peak force production in a lot of other athletes' lives. Like, I wanted to have those tools in my toolbox. So I look at those as all tools. When I found an objective that I'm trying to go after, then you know what, this is the perfect tool for that objective. We're going to apply it. We're going to progress it over time. And that's how we'll do that. In terms of fundamentals, I have a short list of things that I believe not only as an athlete, but every human being should be able to do. And if you were going to sustain human functionality till the day you die, these are things that you should continually either be doing daily or have some rudimentary literacy with these things, like breathing and bracing, squatting, hinging, pressing, pulling, crawling, carrying. Those are all basic human functions that we should be able to do. Now, just a century ago, it was almost mandated. You could find that in every schoolyard. Adolescents were going through those things. I remember vividly being taught by the details how to skip rope. And nowadays we have fighters that, 30 years old, no one's ever taught them how to jump rope before, or do something as simple as a high knee run. Those are things that we used to learn in elementary and secondary school, and now they're not there. So we're losing some of these basic functions. And so we see it all the time. We see elite athletes, professional athletes doing high skill level things, but they're doing it at a proficiency that's so weak because they simply don't know how to breathe and brace, or their proficiency is so weak because they don't have lower limb control because they've never been taught unilateral or coordinated bilateral movement for that matter. So that basic list for me, and everyone's list is a little different, but that list for me kind of covers those things. If you can squat and you can hinge, I can teach you to lunge, and I can teach you to crawl. I can teach you to shoot a single leg penetration step. I can teach you to dip a slip and to throw an uppercut off of it, because you now know how to negotiate your body over your center of mass, or your center of mass over your base of support. So while people look at those things and are like, that's a really simple thing, they're teaching you very fundamental things that will allow us to elaborate on very complex things later on. So those are kind of my fundamentals. And then those fundamentals, if they're not solid, I can't teach an Olympic lift if someone doesn't know how to hinge. So I can't.
It's so, I'm so glad that you talk about the fundamentals, because we regularly talk about this at Jiu-Jitsu when we're, we know guys who like to do spinny, invert and shit, but they can't pass guard. It's like, so I talk about it regularly with guys as well. I'm forever seeing these fucking choreographed pad workouts, guys boxing, and you go, yeah, but what happens when the guy just steps back? Then what?
Yeah.
Because you're not moving your feet, you're just standing still and throwing these outrageous thing where the pad man's doing most of the work.
Yeah,
it's infuriating to me when
it's also, it's one of those things where everyone is up to their own interpretation. So the pad workouts, like, it's nothing near what it's going to be like in a fight. So what are you using the pad workout for? Just like a hinge. A hinge can be a deadlift, it can be a kettlebell swing, or it can be a box jump. They're all a hinge. But what are you using it for? So that's usually my question, is contextually explain to me what you're doing with that. If it's just a placeholder, then I tell them they're a fucking idiot. But if there's actually a benefit to it, he's got terrible, endurance in his shoulders, so we use the pad workouts to build up a bit of work capacity. Okay, that makes good sense. But if you're telling me that that's how you're going to work combinations to benefit a fight strategy, then yeah, I'm with you. That doesn't work like that, because that guy's face is not just going to jump in front of your hand like the pad does.
Yeah.
So it's all about the contextual use of it. What's the intent and what does it bring to the table?
One of the things also that I wanted to jump back to, just because you said, going back 100 years. So as much as, obviously, I will assume you embrace, modern technology and modern application. Do you still look back at, like old strongman books about how they did things and how they lifted and things like that? Because I think a lot of people, there's still things that we could, like, as you're saying, forgotten, where people like to look at the next whatever it is without going back and going, okay, these guys were essentially not doing all that much different. And it's quite interesting to like hear somebody's opinion on that, going backwards to look at what they were doing, because essentially pulling and pressing.
The mentality was beautiful, because the mentality was like, hey, you think you can pick that up? And then the guy says, yeah, I'm going to try to pick that up. Then the next guy comes along, well, I can pick this up. And whether it was an Atlas stone or a Thomas Inch dumbbell or whatever the case was, that was kind of the mentality. There wasn't such a calculated approach where they needed technology to guide them into that approach, or a specific piece of equipment. Hey, that's an anvil and it weighs 200 kilos. Can you pick that up? That was the mindset. So I appreciate some of that. We do use some of that actually with odd objects and what they call modern day, they call it more strongman training now, but even odd objects such as awkwardly heavy kettlebells. You know, when you start picking up a kettlebell that's your body weight, or for some people body weight and a half, you know, they make kettlebells upwards of 260 pounds, you know, 130, 140 kilos now. Or a mace, a steel mace, which is a 1 meter stick with upwards of a 22 kilo ball attached to the end of it. Well, now you're dealing with not only, you know, when I lift a barbell, it's a perfectly balanced, engineered piece of equipment. Alico's not fucking around when it comes to perfectly engineering that thing. So I can optimally put it in the perfect spot where I can pull 3 times my body weight off the ground. Brilliant for maximal strength. When you look at a tool like an awkwardly heavy kettlebell or a steel mace for that matter, now we're dealing with leverage disadvantage. Now we're dealing with relative strength, which has another side of benefits to it, which can help insulate and supplement our maximal strength that we can do with a very cooperative barbell lift. So I describe them a lot of times, they're just very uncooperative exercises when you're swinging a kettlebell or a mace, or even a body. When you get into wrestling drills and things like that, jiu-jitsu drills, you're learning how to negotiate a resistance that's not as cooperative. So when you look at a lot of the traditional like strongman lifts and things, that's what they got good at. They were maximally strong, and they did pull heavy things, squat heavy things, press heavy things to get maximally strong. But then they picked up really weird shit, sometimes livestock, because it required a certain level of relative strength and skill to overcome leverage disadvantages, which I find to be really transferable in a sport like fighting, because your opponent never wants to be cooperative. They don't want to be in the position that you want them to be in to pick them up or to put them down. So you're constantly having to fight for position. There's a lot of positional accuracy that is required, and that's what odd lifts require. They require positional accuracy, or you just simply will not pick it up.
Yeah, I think the only thing I've talked about this before. Is the only thing that I've ever tried to pick up that was weird. It's not even weird, really. It's just an Atlas stone, and it was a 120 kilo Atlas stone in the gym that I used to lift weights in. Now, 120 kilo to pull off the floor would be where I would start warming up for a deadlift.
Sure, yeah.
And like 120 kilo Atlas, but it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
couldn't move it other than roll it back and
4
forward.
inches in diameter. Yeah.
What the fuck is this? And just tried everything and went up. No, I can't move it. I can't get it off the ground.
Yeah,
because that is super bizarre. But yeah, it's So it's quite it's always an interesting to speak to somebody who's like yourself on the idea of the application of these things. It's not often we get a chance to do it, but yeah, it's interesting to get your opinion on it.
Totally. Just with you talking about those fundamentals and the basics, Bo. So you said at the start you have, again, I apologise, I forget the number, but you said sort of 30 or 40 local to the Institute fighters, and then you have people come in from 85% of the roster come in for various times. So how are you assessing and evaluating them then based on those fundamentals? Because you must have people that come in, like you're saying, 30 years old, never skipped rope, might be okay at a deadlift, but I've never trained with kettlebells or vice versa. So how are you evaluating and assessing that to then work out what you need to do to improve or work on over that period of time, whether it's 6, 8, 12, 14 weeks?
Sure. So I'm going to steal a quote from our director of performance here, Dr. Duncan French. If you're not assessing, you're guessing. And so if it's a new athlete that we've not had eyes on before, that we haven't had an engagement with, the first thing, everything starts with assessment. And so we'll schedule them for a battery of introduction, consultation, and assessments with not only our strength and conditioning staff, but our medical staff, our team of dietitians, our psychologists, and really anyone on our team that we can get them to engage with. They're not always, when they come here, their first initiative of engagement is not always centered around strength and conditioning. In fact, it might be, I know they got a strength coach. I really don't want to fucking talk to that guy. I just want to talk to the dietitian because I want to get my weight squared away. It starts that way. And then the way our team is built and engineered is that any of us can operate as a lead at any given time. And it's kind of our job then to direct them towards the other services to teach them how these things holistically work together. So in terms of, if I get an athlete for the first time, we'll do a consultation. I'll get some understanding at where they're at in their career, what they've accomplished, what they want to accomplish physically, where they are, what some of their goals and aspirations are physically. And then we'll start with a battery of diagnostics. During that battery of diagnostics, they're going to go through a fundamental daily warm-up. Our daily warm-up is going to have criteria in it of all of those categories I just listed: breathing and bracing, hinging, squatting, crawling, carrying, pressing, pulling. All of those things will be in there in some version or another. Most pretty simple, just to get some idea of their literacy in them. And then we'll go through our diagnostics. We'll get some absolute measurements and objective measurements around strength and power, energy system diagnostics. And once they've concluded that, we'll have time to compile our data. In the meantime, our medical team is screening them. They're doing a basic physical assessment. They're also doing a movement screen that they've engineered that's centered around a lot of those principles as well: breathing mechanics, bracing, the ability to hinge, the ability to squat, lunge, balance. Pretty simple and pretty quick to obtain, but it's just to gather some understanding of what their competencies are. So then when we begin training, even if regardless of the results of that, they're going to see that daily warm-up again, and they're going to see progressions of that daily warm-up. That daily warm-up is going to provide frequency in those movements, but to where they never depreciate. They'll always be there. It's also going to provide daily feedback on what they're getting good at and what they're still pretty terrible at. And that will give me some understanding of how much to progress the loaded characteristics of their workouts, as well as maybe other things that we need to be sprinkling in as ingredients, supplemental ingredients into their training. So quickly we'll recognize, okay, this is someone that's high up on the ladder that we can dive into some more complex schemes early on, or this is someone who may be a high performer in the cage, but is very rudimentary in terms of their physical skills. So we may start further down on the progression ladder. And, you know, I have a staff of, I have 2 full-time coaches that work here with me. And then we have a couple of interns. I also have a staff in Shanghai, China that works at the Institute there. And I give full autonomy to those coaches to investigate and dissect those athletes while they're going through those daily warm-ups and understanding where their progression needs to lie, and helping identify their needs analysis and how to prescribe moving forward. And we'll discuss as a team, but I really give them the autonomy to be able to figure that out and come up with a strategy for improvement.
It sounds like a really, really well thought out plan and program that you guys have put together. Because, you know, and you know, I know from amateur boxing, you know, I started 2009. And the whole amateur system, and I know, and you know, a lot of the guys who were pro, they had no idea, like still don't really have any idea how to get strong, how to get fit, how to cut. There really isn't any idea. So to hear a program like this in place is really impressive. Like the organization, from everybody singing from the same hymn sheet.
Sure.
Like, this is how we do it, and this is how we're going to go around about it. It's super impressive to see that.
Now I'll tell you, that's 5 years of development. So I didn't just cook that up on my lunch break. These have been things that we've dealt with, that we've revisited, that we've refined, and really sharpened over the last 5 years. So this has been a team effort. I mean, input and feedback from our medical staffs, from our performance director, from our sports scientists. You know, this is everyone contributing and pitching in. So it starts with a mission, and that's a mission that again, Dr. Duncan French has kind of set us on in the beginning. We kind of had some very clear parameters of this is what we need to accomplish. And everyone in their own respective areas kind of figuring out and identifying how they were going to contribute towards that mission. And for us, a lot of it was, man, we need to establish some standards of how athletes move and how they, you know, if you're below standard in how you hinge, you shouldn't be swinging a bodyweight kettlebell. If you can't hinge, you know, you shouldn't get past maybe learning how to jump on a box or how to hinge for a rod jump or something that is relatively unloaded until you become more competent. in that movement. And we have a lot of athletes that they struggle with the disassociation between the lumbar and the hip girdle, and their ability to not do that affects how they hinge, which affects how they load into the ground. It affects how they use their posterior chain. It affects how they throw their right hand. And until they become acquainted with that chain of systems, it's tough to improve performance. Sure, I can load them and I can get them tired and I can get them fatigued. I don't know that is causing the type of adaptation that we're looking for to be able to deliver a payload that's going to put someone down on the ground.
Yeah, so that's something that, sorry, Chris, that's something that Chris has mentioned as well previously when we've been chatting, Bo, is that element of those weekend warrior bootcamp types. Anyone can design a workout that can make you tired and sore and, you know, not able to perform the next day, but it must be a balancing act for yourselves to make sure that you're loading them, but loading them at appropriate levels so they're able to perform the next day and the next day throughout the camp.
Yeah. I like analogies, and I mean the boot camp approach, that group approach, that's a fishing net. You throw a net out, you'll catch some fish for sure. There's no doubt about it. But if you want to catch that really big motherfucker, you're going to need to specialize and get precise with a specific lure at a specific depth, water temperature, on a specific time of day, if you're going to catch a big, smart, giant fucking fish. And so if you want to create a world champion, it's the same way. There has to be a level of precision. There has to be a level of precision in everything that they do from start to finish. And those are the millimeters, those are the inches of separation between first and fifth place. You know, I tell people all the time, when you look at our fighters that are outside of the top 20 in each of our weight classes, there's a lot of commonality. When they start to get special or to separate is when they get inside the top 5. You get inside the top 5, there are some definitive parameters physically and skillfully that make them very different from those that are outside the top 20. And a lot of that has to do with direct intent around their training, not just their strength and conditioning training, but their tactical training, and the accuracy at which they perform it.
Now, do you think that, you know, given another 5 years of development, that separation from, you know, the top 5, the elite of the elite, do you think that separation will become greater and more obvious from, you know, 10 to 20 than the top 10, because, you know, it grows and grows?
I think with the culture absorbing, you know, better education and the culture really trying to better prepare fighters and establish fight camps, I think you're actually going to see it spread the other way. I think you're going to see that specialty of the top 5 turn into the top 10. And what we see up to the top 20, maybe back up into the top 30. And the reason I say that has a lot to do with the tactical side of the sport right now. 15 years ago, you had a wrestling specialist, grappling specialist, who then learned how to strike at 25 years old or 30 years old. Or you had a kickboxer or a striker who learned how to wrestle at 25 or 30 years old. Nowadays, with the predominance of MMA gyms all over the world, we're getting 13, 14, 15-year-old kids in amateur ranks that are learning how to fight MMA right from the onset. And so what that does for you from a knowledge standpoint, it gives you an understanding of distance, knowing the difference between punching distance, kicking distance, and takedown distance, which is always the learning curve as people jump from genre to genre of combat sport. It's understanding the distance of when I'm in danger and when I can attack. The best fighters in the world are good at understanding all three: punching distance, kicking distance, and takedown distance. If you're not well versed in any one of those three, you're going to get exploited pretty quickly. So you have this young generation of fighters that's learning that fundamentally right from the jump as a teenager. And so that's causing a shift in the evolution of the sport, where we're, you know, there's not as many specialists getting into the sport. We're actually getting thoroughbred MMA fighters from a young age.
Yeah, I remember when I first started to watch MMA, I think it would have been like Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz, and, you know, that kind of time frame. And it was always they always came up on the, you know, the bar across the bottom, you know, the record, and then it would come back, you know, with you know, boxing or, you know, Muay Thai or wrestling background or something. It came up with the background. It was like you said, now there's a lot of these young kids now are just learning how to fight MMA. those little assholes are going to be a real problem. And
Oh yeah. Well, now the amateur associations are pushing for MMA in the Olympics, which is it would be with it would be similar to amateur boxing. It would be with headgear, shin guards, heavier gloves, and it'd probably be in a 2-minute round format, 3 2-minute rounds or something along those lines. But they have amateur youth fight leagues globally now that are like 1 3-minute round, again with that equipment, shins, gloves, headgear, no headshots. They're only allowed to strike to the body and to the legs. And even some of the leagues don't allow ground and pound. You can score a takedown and you can do ground control time. You just can't strike while they're on the ground. So they have protective measures involved. But what this is doing is you're giving live fight round experience to younger athletes, and they're not necessarily taking the same amount of damage. So you're giving them the ability to mature as a tactician early on, which, man, I can't wait to see some of them when they're 22, 23 years old.
That's one of the things that it was always a little bit confusing to me in the beginning. It still is confusing, actually. With MMA is there wasn't given, a lot of guys didn't get any time to just get rounds, to get rounds under their belt. And that was a thing in boxing where a guy turns pro and he might have 20 fights where he's just gaining experience, getting rounds. Yeah. And it looks like you're about to speak to somebody.
I'm good.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was going to be something really important.
Just turning something off on my screen.
No, it's just boxers, professional boxers always got 20 fights to go get some rounds, to get some, beat some guys up with that. They just used to throw guys in MMA. They've had 7 or 8 fights and kill your fighter for the title. And you go, maybe it'd be nice if they had, like you're saying, some seasoning. Get some
beginning too. It was much more of no holds barred. And the sport to evolve and to be able to be accepted by fight commissions in all 50 states, let alone overseas and other countries, they had to formalize the rule sets. They had to formalize and come up with a unified rule system. And so that's why you saw the evolution of the sport from more no holds barred to mixed martial arts, which is much more of a regulated gentleman's game compared to back then when, yes, hey, Jimmy's free on Saturday. He's 30 pounds heavier than Tommy, but that's okay. We'll let him fight, Not much closer to the human cockfight mentality compared to what we have now.
So there's a couple of things, and we're not quite getting there, but we're getting down onto the downward stretch now. So there's a couple of things I want to ask. So you were talking about 3 times bodyweight deadlift. Is that something that you've done? You've done a 3 times bodyweight deadlift?
Not myself. I think my best deadlift was, I'll try to give it to you in kilos, 515 pounds at about.
Oh, that's very similar. That's very similar. I think I was around
81 kilos when I did that. But.
Okay, so you're way stronger than me. I did 240 kilos, which I believe is 507.
Okay.
So I think that's around about that kind of weight. So yeah, that starts getting heavy.
Yeah, I tell you, there's no better way to battle yourself inside your head than grinding on something that just doesn't want to move. I mean,
yeah,
it's just such a mental fuck, man.
It's one of the things that I've always liked about, I love deadlifting. One of the things that I've always liked is, you see it in every gym where, somebody will, it's all you, bro, when somebody's benching or somebody's squatting, and the friends kind of got them under the armpits or whatever. And there's no way to cheat a deadlift. It either comes off the fucking ground or it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. So 515 at 81 kilos. 81 kilos will be 180.
Yeah, about that.
So yes, super close, like 2.7 times body weight.
Yeah,
because I think we did speak about this before, Ali, and I can't remember who it was with. And I was like, I think the golden rule was always like 3 times body weight deadlift was like elite. That's you're up there. But I don't even think that's true.
When you lift around some of the women that I used to lift with, you don't feel that elite.
Yeah, like because Steffi Cohen's like 4 times body weight. You're like, how?
Oh yeah.
Like how we did talk about this because when I did 240, and I only did it once, and I went like 235 a couple of times, and I felt like as you do, endorphins are real, and I was fucking and I fucking thought like the strongest man in the world, and this, and then it was like a Swedish girl, I can't remember her name now, and she was like a 65 kilo lifter, and she pulled 240, and then it was like, oh,
that's amazing. Yeah, my wife pulled 182 kilos at 58 kilos body weight.
Jesus Christ, that's 3 points.
She wasn't a power lifter; she was a weightlifter. But
I'm such a little bitch. Yeah, it's amazing. It's I love watching it. You know, I don't even get angry. I just think it's tremendous.
Oh, it's impressive. Yeah, I mean, you can't help but just be, just admire what they can do. Super impressive.
So you're a jiu-jitsu guy as well, right?
I do. I've been, I started my jiu-jitsu journey when I was in college, around 2002.
Okay.
Did about 3 years worth, then started traveling and working, didn't do anything really consistent for a while. When I was with the national teams for wrestling, I used to wrestle and grapple with them a little bit, but nothing formal, no formal curriculum. And then when we moved to Vegas, I took a deep dive. I was like, man, I got to jump back on this wagon. And I took a deep dive back in. So about a 15-year hiatus from a structured program. And man, I love it now. I've been back in it now for about 3 years, and I got two little boys that are in it as well. So it's become a little bit of a family affair now.
It's nice when the kids are involved. My now 18-year-old trained. He's dropped off now because he's 18 and has better things to do with his time. But he trained for a while, and it is nice when the family all come together. Because you hunt. You're an outdoorsman as well, aren't you, Bo?
I am. You guys have been doing your research.
We have indeed, yes. Because it's something that me and Chris are. Because over in Scotland, it's just like we don't have hunting in the same way that you guys have over there. Over here, it's essentially upper class, isn't it, Chris? You go to shoot in the States and pay a lot of money to take down a stag, of which you might get a couple of steaks, and the rest of the stag goes back to the estate. But in America, I know you're a big hunter and an outdoorsman, aren't you?
Yes, I grew up around it. My mother's family actually they immigrated from Scotland down. They came in through Philadelphia in the Northeast, and they went straight down south, and they bought a plot of land about 50 miles off the Gulf Coast, right on the border of Mississippi and Louisiana. So we actually still own that land today. It's about 90 square acres. So my family has hunted and fished that my whole life. And then as I've grown up and made buddies in other places, I've just been fortunate enough to hunt a few different states. And I did take, quite a bit of time off from that as well, just as I was working and trying to earn my stripes and make my way through this profession. But in the last, 10 years or so, I've definitely gotten back into it more. And I'm excited. My wife has gotten into it quite a bit as well. We're actually trying to strategize in the next year or two, trying to get overseas somewhere to do some things. So it's a lot of fun. And I'm a big believer in knowing how to do things with your hands, knowing how to provide for yourself, just trying to be a more capable human being. And, harvesting meat is one of those things for me.
This is something that, so I have a friend who my friend David who does go shooting, and he keeps inviting me, but it never works out, just with work and life. And but I have to, I don't have a license. You have to have you can't bow hunt in Scotland. You have to rifle hunt. So I need to go learn how to shoot properly, and I'd love to go with them and actually, just exactly how you've described it there, just be more capable. And we talked about this because the whole podcast started at the start of lockdown. And me and you were talking about, we've talked about this in the podcast with a few different people. And one of the things that struck me early on was like, this whole thing could fall to bits really, really. So it could fall to bits so quickly. And I knew where I was getting what, like in my head, because I'm a bit crazy. In my head, I knew where I was getting water from. Okay, I know where there's a really fast running stream. I can get water from there if there's no water. I don't know why there'd be no water, but that was in my head. So I already had figured out how I was going to strap, a 20-liter can and go get water every day. And then I was like, hey, but I don't know how to hunt.
Yeah.
So what happens when everything goes tits up?
What's crazy? We're only 150 years removed from having supermarkets. We used to, that's how you went and got meat or food, or you went out and you cut down wheat and you refined it and you made bread like that. We're not that far away from that. So it is a little bit scary how much we've forgotten in just 150 years time.
So yes, I've got some. I'm just looking at it just now because it's quite funny. A former guest of ours, I have a knife making book when I'm going to, want to start like setting up and how do I make a knife.
Yeah,
really gotten more into this. Like how did
and I tell you, forging is another skill that it's awesome. It's one of those things, those rites of passage that if you can do that, there's a lot of things that you're capable of, whether you know it or not. I've got a couple of friends here stateside, one in Hawaii, one in Montana, that they're both master bladesmiths. That's what they do for a living. And so what they can take a chunk of metal and turn it into it's mind blowing.
Would that be what's his name? Is it Josh Smith?
Josh Smith owns Montana Knife Company. Yeah. Man, he's a fantastic human being, great hunter himself. And he's got a ranch in Montana, and that's where his forge is at. He's been a custom knife maker for a long time, and then he's just recently got a partner, and they've started the Montana Knife Company, which is a series of production knives that he makes. And they're fantastic. And he makes skinners, he makes fleshing knives, he's made little carry knives, and they're tough. They're tough, and they are sharp as fuck.
So we had on Laura Zera, who's really that was it. So I have Laura's book, and so Laura's now a friend. She's just fucking crazy as
she's amazing.
She's
I've been in camp a couple of times with Laura.
And so I have things where I was just talking to somebody about this recently, and I'm just looking to where it was. I would show you, but I have Laura's toenail. I have a toenail of Laura's. Yeah, legitimately, yeah. She's fucking mad. I fucking had it, I would show you. But yeah, I've got a toenail of Laura's because we're now friends. So, so I've had books, and I want to learn how to make knives. I love that life. I was talking about it with
and it's something that, I mean, honestly, if you just put some time into, like, anyone can learn to do that.
Yeah. So
there's an artistic side where the talent comes in, but in terms of making a tool that you can use every day, anyone can learn how to do that.
So I'm lucky that I have, I own a business, a couple of businesses, and I have my own little gym set up now. So I have enough space where I can put something together and just basic, and fuck about and try and play with things. I have that time, and I'm single and no kids because I'm unlovable, so I have the time to do it. So I'm just going to be the crazy guy who starts the crazy guy in Scotland who learns how to make knives. That's going to be me. But
when the apocalypse hits, you'll be the one everyone runs to.
I hope so, man. Listen, we're getting close to half past, so I think we must be getting close to 60 minutes. One thing I would say, just because you've said your mum's side came from Scotland, do you know whereabout she came from?
The area I'm not familiar, but we have some headstones in our family cemetery that are the oldest one. I believe they were buried in 1851, and the last name was McInnes.
Okay.
There's McInnes. There's another, I'm trying to think of the other name that's prevalent. My mother's maiden name is Woodard. That has kind of transcended through the generations, but McGinnis and McLeod, those are the two. Oh, okay. Those are the two oldest names that are in that cemetery.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And one of I can't remember how many greats. It had to have been maybe a fourth great grandmother. Her name was Ollie Idella McLeod.
Oh.
Which I'd never heard the name Ollie for a woman. I had never heard the name Idella before until I read that woman's headstone.
That's unusual.
The
other thing. What size of rash guard do you wear?
I wear a large.
A large. Okay, let me see.
Yeah.
I designed a Scottish rash guard, so it's I'll send you a picture where it's William Wallace choking Nessie.
Yes.
I'll get Ali to send you a picture, and if you send your details, we'll get you one out.
Oh man, that's awesome.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, we'll get that sorted.
Yeah,
Definitely sweat that thing up.
Definitely. Just as we're winding down then both, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Just so we can send some other people your way, or where can people find you and find out more about your work and on the social media or internet or whatever needs. And we'll tag this into the notes and onto the video.
Yeah, my IG account is bo.sandoval. My Twitter handle is @Oly Strength, OLY Strength. Those are the two fastest ways to get me. I typically, people, DM or message me. I usually get to them. I don't always get to them immediately, but I'm really good about not forgetting anybody. So I always love the stories when, I'll send someone an answer and they'll reply back and they're like, man, that was 3 months ago. Man, thanks for just taking the time and answering. I'm like, hey, I'm not always the fastest. There's a lot of shit on my plate, but I love interacting with people. So I always try my best to get back to them.
Awesome, man. Well, we really appreciate your time, and it was good fun. And it's been we haven't done one in a little while, so we were probably a little rusty to start with, but I felt we got warmed up there. So yeah, man. I'll if you send details to Ali, I'll get one of those sent out to you, and we better let you run, man, because that's basically 60 minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, man. Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Likewise, thank you for taking the time. So that's episode 68 with Bo Sandoval. We are officially back, saying done and dusted. So thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Okay, man.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.